The room went silent the second the wine hit his face. 300 people in $1 million ballroom, crystal lights, polished marble, deals worth hundreds of millions hanging in the air, and not one of them moved. Ethan Caldwell stood there smirking, holding the empty glass like he'd just proven a point. "You don't belong here," he said, loud enough for everyone to hear. The man he humiliated didn't argue. Marcus Reed didn't raise his voice, didn't step back, didn't even wipe the wine off right away. He just stood there, calm, still, like none of it surprised him. Phones came out. Eyes turned away. No one stepped in. Because in a room like that, people don't risk their place. But as Marcus slowly reached into his pocket and pulled out a simple white handkerchief, something small caught the light on his wrist. A silver cufflink, engraved with 2 letters. R.E. Easy to miss. Unless you knew what it meant. And the truth is, someone in that room did. What no one realized in that moment, what Ethan would regret in less than an hour, was that the man he just humiliated wasn't a mistake. He was the reason the entire night existed, and by the time they figured it out, it would already be too late. The first sound wasn't loud. It was soft, almost delicate, the faint clink of glass being taken from someone's hand. Then came the voice. "You think you can just walk in here and help yourself?" The ballroom went still. Crystal chandeliers cast warm gold light across polished marble floors. A string quartet had been playing near the far wall, but the music faltered, one violin trailing off into an uncertain silence. 300 guests, men in tuxedos, women in gowns that shimmered like water, turned their heads all at once toward the same point. Near the bar, beneath a column wrapped in white orchids, a man stood alone. Marcus Reed didn't look like he belonged there. His suit was clean but understated, charcoal instead of jet black, tailored well but without the flash of designer labels. No cufflinks of diamonds, no watch that caught the light from across the room. Just quiet, careful choices. The kind of choices a man makes when he doesn't need to prove anything. In his hand, moments ago, had been a glass of champagne. Now it was gone. Ethan Caldwell held it instead, his fingers wrapped around the stem like he'd taken something that had always been his. Tall, broad-shouldered, the kind of man who filled space without asking permission. His tuxedo fit like it had been measured down to the last thread. Everything about him spoke of certainty, of ownership, of power he believed no one could challenge. "You didn't answer me," Ethan said, louder this time. Marcus didn't move. A faint ripple passed through the nearby guests, people stepping back just slightly, not enough to be obvious, just enough to create distance, the kind of distance people make when they don't want to be part of something, but don't want to leave either. "I said," Ethan continued, lifting the glass just enough for the light to catch it. "Who exactly do you think you are?" A few people chuckled. Not real laughter. Reflex. Marcus blinked once, slow and steady, like he was adjusting to a change in light. "I'm just having a drink," he said. His voice was calm, not defensive, not apologetic, just level. That seemed to irritate Ethan more than anything. "Just having a drink," he repeated, a sharp smile pulling at one corner of his mouth. "At a private gala. Invitation only. Sponsored tables running $50,000 a seat." He leaned in slightly, lowering his voice just enough to make people lean closer to hear. "And you thought you'd just blend in?" A woman beside Ethan, Jennifer, judging by the way others deferred to her, lifted her phone. Not openly, casually, but the camera was pointed in the right direction. Across the room, more phones began to rise. Marcus's gaze shifted, just for a moment, taking it all in. The lights, the faces, the quiet hunger of people watching something unfold. Then he looked back at Ethan. I'm exactly where I need to be. It was a simple sentence, but something about the way he said it, unhurried, certain, made the air tighten. Ethan laughed, a real laugh this time, loud enough to echo against the high ceiling. You hear that? He said, turning slightly to his group. He's exactly where he needs to be. A few of them laughed with him, louder now, encouraged. Let me help you out, Ethan said, stepping closer again. People like you don't end up in rooms like this by accident. So either you slipped past security, or someone made a mistake. Marcus didn't step back, didn't flinch, didn't raise his voice. Then maybe you should check, he said. For a fraction of a second, something flickered across Ethan's face. Surprise, irritation, something that didn't quite fit the script he'd already written in his head. But it vanished just as quickly. Oh, we will, Ethan said. He turned slightly, reaching for a passing tray. Not the champagne this time. Red wine. Deep, dark, expensive. He took the glass, barely looking at the server, then turned back to Marcus. Because here's the thing, Ethan went on, his tone shifting, harder now, sharper. This event is about standards, about knowing who belongs. The room seemed to lean in. The silence deepened. You don't. And before anyone could say a word, before the thought could even form, he tipped the glass. The wine left in a smooth arc, catching the chandelier light for a split second before it landed. Across Marcus's face, down his cheek, soaking into the collar of his shirt, spreading through the fabric in slow, dark lines. A collective inhale swept the room. No one moved. No one spoke. Even the servers froze, trays suspended midair. The only sound was the faint drip of liquid hitting the marble floor. Marcus stood there, still. For a moment that felt longer than it should have. Then, slowly, he reached into his pocket and pulled out a handkerchief. White, folded clean. He lifted it to his face and wiped the wine away with deliberate care, like he was removing dust rather than something thrown at him in front of 300 people. His movements were steady, precise, not a single hint of panic, not a trace of anger. As he lowered the cloth, the cuff of his sleeve shifted slightly. Just enough. A glint of metal caught the light. Subtle, almost easy to miss. A cufflink. Silver, worn smooth at the edges, engraved with 2 small letters, R.E. Near the edge of the room, a young server paused mid-step, her eyes narrowed just for a second, as if she'd seen something she couldn't quite place. Then she looked away. Back at Marcus. Back at the man standing in the center of a room full of silence, wine soaking into his shirt, dignity untouched. Ethan exhaled sharply, satisfied. Maybe now you'll remember where you belong, he said. No one challenged him. No one stepped forward. The cameras kept recording, and Marcus Reed, standing alone in a room full of power, simply folded his handkerchief and met Ethan's gaze again. Calm, unshaken. As if the moment hadn't ended yet. As if something else was coming. Something no one in that room was ready for. And for the first time, a quiet question began to move through the crowd, unspoken but impossible to ignore. Why isn't he reacting? And more importantly, who is he really? The question lingered in the air like the faint scent of spilled wine. No one said it out loud. But it was there, in the shifting eyes, in the subtle way conversations stalled, in the tension that stretched across the ballroom like a thread pulled too tight. Marcus Reed stood at the center of it all, his shirt still damp, a dark stain spreading slowly across the crisp fabric. The chandelier light softened nothing. If anything, it made the contrast sharper. Clean lines ruined, elegance interrupted. And yet, He didn't look ruined. He looked steady. As if this moment didn't define him. As if it didn't even surprise him. A server moved past, hesitating just long enough to glance at him, then lowering her eyes again. Somewhere in the back of the room, a glass clinked softly against a tray. The quartet had not resumed playing. Ethan Caldwell turned away first. That was the thing about men like him. Once they believed they had won, they lost interest. "Get security," he said over his shoulder, already reaching for another drink. "We're done here." His voice carried, casual now, like he'd just handled a minor inconvenience. Jennifer followed his gaze, her phone still raised. She zoomed in slightly, capturing Marcus's face, the stain on his shirt, the silence around him. "Unbelievable," she murmured, though her tone suggested the opposite. He really thought he could pass. A few people laughed again. Quieter this time, less certain. Marcus didn't respond. Instead, he folded his handkerchief once more and slipped it back into his pocket. His fingers paused briefly at the edge of his jacket, pressing the fabric flat, as if restoring order where he could. Then he took a breath. Not deep, not dramatic, just enough. And in that small, controlled moment, the noise of the room seemed to fade again. Because he wasn't leaving. He didn't argue, didn't explain, didn't plead. He simply remained where he was. As if the ground beneath his feet belonged to him just as much as it did to anyone else in that room. Across the ballroom, near the registration desk set against a mirrored wall, Rebecca Walsh stared at her tablet. She'd been watching from a distance at first, unsure if she should intervene. Event coordinators were trained to smooth problems, not escalate them. And Ethan Caldwell, he wasn't just any guest. He was one of the biggest names in the room. But something about the scene had unsettled her. Now her fingers moved quickly across the screen, scrolling through the guest list. Names, titles, companies, all neatly organized, color-coded, verified. She searched for Reed. Nothing. Her brow furrowed. That didn't make sense. She tried again. Slower this time. REED. Still nothing. Behind her, the city stretched out beyond the glass walls. Chicago at night, glowing in layers of amber and white. Traffic flowed like a distant river. Everything out there continued as usual. Inside, something had shifted. "Find anything?" a voice asked quietly. Rebecca looked up. It was one of the junior coordinators, a young man named Alex, his tie slightly crooked, his expression tense. "I don't know," she admitted. "He's not on the primary list." Alex glanced toward Marcus, then quickly back at her. "Then how did he get in?" Rebecca didn't answer right away. Because she remembered something. A moment from earlier that evening, before the crowd had thickened, before the music had grown louder. A man stepping through the entrance doors alone. No valet ticket. No greeting. Just a quiet nod. Rebecca had been busy then, checking in a group from New York, barely looking up as she processed names and handed out programs. But she remembered the hesitation. Her own. "Sir, your name?" she had asked, eyes still on the screen. "Marcus Reed." The name hadn't immediately appeared. There had been a delay. A flicker. The system loading. Long enough for her to look up. Long enough to see him properly. He hadn't looked impatient. Hadn't leaned forward or tried to rush her. He had simply stood there, hands loosely at his sides, shoulders relaxed, as if time didn't press on him the way it did on everyone else. "I don't see—" she had started. Then the screen refreshed. A new line appeared. Not in the main list, in a separate category, highlighted differently. She hadn't read it fully. Not then. There had been people waiting, pressure building. "Oh, there you are," she had said quickly, covering her uncertainty with a practiced smile. "Welcome, Mr. Reed." He had nodded once. "Thank you." No questions, no hesitation, just quiet acknowledgement. And then he had walked in. Rebecca blinked, pulling herself back to the present. Her fingers hovered over the tablet again. "There was a second list," she said slowly. "What?" Alex asked. "I think—" She stopped, glancing toward Ethan's group, then back at Marcus. "I think he came in under a different category." Alex frowned. "Like what?" Rebecca swallowed. "I don't know, but..." Because she hadn't looked closely enough. Because she had assumed it didn't matter. Because in a room full of names that meant everything, she had let one pass without understanding it. Back near the bar, Marcus shifted his weight slightly. The wine had begun to dry against his skin, leaving a faint tightness along his collar. He resisted the urge to adjust it again. Instead, he looked out over the room. Not at Ethan, not at Jennifer, at everyone else. At the faces that turned away when his gaze met theirs. At the ones that lingered just long enough to confirm what they thought they saw, then quickly looked elsewhere. At the phones still raised, capturing, documenting, but not intervening. A memory brushed against him, uninvited. A different room, smaller. Fluorescent lights buzzing overhead. A man behind a desk flipping through paperwork, barely glancing up. "You don't seem like the right fit," the man had said. Not unkindly, just certain. Marcus had stood there then too, hands still, voice calm. "Based on what?" he had asked. The man had shrugged. "You know how it is." Marcus exhaled slowly now, letting the memory pass. Different room, same silence. A pair of security guards began moving through the crowd. Dark suits, earpieces. Professional but cautious. They approached Ethan first. "Sir," one of them said quietly. Ethan gestured toward Marcus without even looking. "Him," he said. "Check his credentials. He's not supposed to be here." The guards nodded, then turned. Their expressions were neutral as they approached Marcus. "Sir," the lead guard said, stopping a few feet away, "we're going to need to verify your invitation." Marcus met his eyes. There was no hostility there. No fear. Just a steady, unhurried presence. "Of course," Marcus said. His hand moved toward his jacket. Not quickly. Not defensively. Just naturally. As if this too was part of something already unfolding. As if he had all the time in the world. And somewhere behind the tension, behind the judgment, behind the certainty of a room that thought it understood everything, something unseen was beginning to shift. Just slightly. Just enough. Like the first crack in glass before it shatters. Because whatever those guards were about to find, it wasn't going to be what anyone expected. And Marcus Reed knew it. He had known it the moment he walked through those doors. The only question now was, how long would it take for everyone else to catch up? Marcus Reed stood still as the security guard waited for him to reach inside his jacket. The room held its breath again, but not in the same way as before. This time, it wasn't shock. It was expectation. People wanted confirmation, proof that everything they had just witnessed made sense, that Ethan had been right, that the man standing there didn't belong. Marcus's fingers brushed the inside of his coat, but he didn't rush. He paused, just briefly, as if deciding something. Then he withdrew his hand, not with an envelope, not with a card, but empty. "I'll show you," he said, his voice calm. "But not yet." The guard hesitated. It was a small hesitation, barely noticeable, but it was there. "Sir, I'm going to need..." I understand, Marcus said gently. And I'm not going anywhere. That answer didn't follow protocol. It didn't escalate, didn't resist, didn't comply. It simply existed. And somehow, that made it harder to respond to. Across the room, Ethan scoffed loudly. You hear that? He said to the people around him. He's setting conditions now. A few laughs followed, though thinner than before. He doesn't get to decide anything, Ethan added, waving a dismissive hand. Get him out. But the guard didn't move immediately. Something about Marcus's stillness had shifted the weight of the moment. Just enough. Just enough to make it feel like removing him might not be as simple as it should be. Marcus let his hand fall back to his side, and as the room leaned toward its conclusion, toward a decision already made in most people's minds, his thoughts moved somewhere else entirely. Not to the ballroom, not to Ethan, but to a street miles away. South Side, early morning, cold air drifting through broken window frames, a narrow row house with peeling paint and a porch that creaked with every step. Marcus stood there in memory, younger by decades, holding a toolbox that was too heavy for his hands at the time. Careful with that hinge, a voice had said from behind him. Mrs. Ellison. 72, stubborn as stone, refusing to move out of a house that had outlived everything around it. It's loose because the wood split, Marcus had answered, kneeling beside the doorframe. If I tighten it too much, it'll crack. She had watched him for a moment, then nodded. You always think ahead, she said. That's why you'll be something one day. Marcus smiled faintly at the memory. Back then, something had meant a steady job, maybe a better apartment, a life where bills didn't pile up faster than paychecks. No one had imagined anything beyond that. Not even him. The memory shifted. A different place. A small community center with flickering lights and folding chairs that never quite sat evenly on the floor. Marcus sat at a table with a stack of papers in front of him. Numbers, charts, budgets written in pencil, erased, rewritten. Across from him, a young man, barely 20, stared at the page like it was written in another language. I don't get it, the kid said, shaking his head. Every time I think I'm ahead, something hits. Marcus leaned back slightly, studying the numbers. You're not ahead, he said, not unkindly. You're just not drowning as fast. The kid let out a tired laugh. Feels about right. Marcus reached over, tapped a section of the page. Here, he said. You're spending more than you think. Not because you're careless, because no one showed you how to track it. The kid frowned. You learned all this where? Marcus paused, then smiled. Everywhere. It had been true. He hadn't had one teacher. He had dozens. A retired accountant who volunteered twice a week. A bank clerk who explained interest rates when no one else would. A night manager who let him stay late just to read old financial reports left behind. Piece by piece, bit by bit. Not in classrooms with polished desks and clear paths, but in fragments, in scraps, in moments most people didn't notice. Marcus blinked, returning to the present. The ballroom felt smaller now, more contained, as if all that noise, all that certainty, couldn't quite reach him where he stood. A drop of wine slid from his collar and hit the marble floor. The sound was faint, but in the silence, it carried. Across the room, Lena, the young server who had paused earlier, watched him again. There was something in the way he stood, not just calm, not just composed, but familiar, like someone who had been underestimated before, more than once, more than 100 times. She shifted her tray to one hand, her eyes narrowing slightly as she studied the cuff of his sleeve again. That small glint of silver, those two letters. R.E. It tugged at her memory, Not fully formed. Not yet. But close. Very close. Back near the center, the guard cleared his throat. "Sir," he said, a little firmer now, "I really do need you to come with us." Marcus met his gaze again. "I will," he said, not defiant, not submissive, just certain. "But I'm not leaving." The guard blinked. "That's not I said I'm not leaving," Marcus repeated, just slightly more clearly. Ethan laughed again, louder this time, though there was a sharp edge beneath it now. "This is unbelievable," he said. "You're giving him a choice?" The second guard shifted his stance, glancing at his partner. Something wasn't adding up. Not yet, but enough to make them hesitate. And in that hesitation, something else began to change. The room no longer felt like a place where one man had absolute control. It felt uncertain, unfinished. Marcus glanced once more around the ballroom, at the faces, at the phones, at the people who had already decided who he was. Then he looked back at the guard. "I'll cooperate," he said quietly. "But you might want to double-check your list first. A simple suggestion, nothing more." But it landed, because it planted something dangerous. Doubt. The guard nodded slowly, almost unconsciously. "Let's verify that," he said. Across the room, Rebecca Walsh froze. Her fingers hovered over the tablet again. That second list, that category she hadn't fully read. Her heart began to beat a little faster, because suddenly, it mattered. And for the first time since the wine hit the floor, the possibility entered the room that something was very, very wrong. Not with Marcus, but with everything else. And if that was true, then the night wasn't ending the way anyone expected. It was just beginning. Rebecca Walsh's fingers hovered above the tablet, trembling slightly now. Not from fear, but from the weight of a realization she couldn't fully grasp yet. There had been a second list. She knew it. Not the standard guest registry, not the long scroll of familiar names. CEOs, investors, political donors, and legacy families who had attended this gala year after year. This had been different, shorter, restricted, and labeled with a word she hadn't paid enough attention to. Primary. Her breath caught. Across the ballroom, the tension thickened. Marcus Reed stood exactly where he had been since the wine had struck him, unmoved, unhurried, untouched by the shifting energy around him. Security lingered close, uncertain now, no longer as confident in their authority. Ethan Caldwell noticed it too, and he didn't like it. "Why are we still standing here?" Ethan snapped, his voice cutting through the room again. "I told you to remove him." The lead guard straightened, but his response came slower this time. "Sir, we're verifying his credentials." "Verifying?" Ethan repeated, incredulous. "There's nothing to verify." "Look at him." The words landed harder than before, not louder, but sharper. A few guests shifted uncomfortably. Others leaned in, drawn by the friction building beneath the surface. Ethan stepped closer to Marcus again, lowering his voice just enough to sound controlled. "This event," he said, gesturing around the room, "is where real decisions get made. Deals that shape companies, markets, entire industries." His eyes flicked briefly to the wine stain still spreading across Marcus's shirt. "You think someone like you just walks into that?" Marcus met his gaze. "I don't think," he said quietly. "I know." That answer didn't diffuse the tension. It deepened it. Because certainty, real certainty, was something people recognized, even when they didn't understand it. Ethan's jaw tightened. "Know what?" he pressed. "That you belong here?" Marcus didn't respond immediately. He let the question sit, Let it breathe. Then he glanced past Ethan, toward the far side of the ballroom, where a cluster of executives stood near a projection screen displaying financial summaries, graphs, forecasts, numbers that meant everything to the people in this room. "I know what's at stake tonight," Marcus said. Ethan followed his gaze just briefly, then scoffed. "Oh, this is rich," he muttered. "You've been listening in, have you? Picking up a few terms, trying to sound like you understand?" Laughter again, but thinner, less confident. Because something about Marcus's tone didn't match the accusation. Not guessing, not imitating, knowing. At the edge of the room, Rebecca's heart began to pound harder. She scrolled faster now, her eyes scanning line after line until... There. A separate tab. She tapped it. The screen refreshed. Fewer names, far fewer. Each one highlighted in gold instead of white. Each one marked with a designation she hadn't fully processed before. Primary investors. Her throat tightened. She scanned quickly. Whitaker Capital, Delaney Holdings, Northbridge Infrastructure, and then her finger froze. Marcus Reed, listed at the top. Designation, lead contributor. Investment category, confidential. Her breath left her in a quiet rush. "No," she whispered. Beside her, Alex leaned in. "What is it?" Rebecca didn't answer right away, because her mind was racing back through the night. The hesitation at check-in, the delayed loading screen, the way his name had appeared differently, not as a guest, but as something else entirely. Across the ballroom, the conversation shifted again. Ethan had turned partially away from Marcus now, addressing the group behind him. "We're finalizing a $300 million infrastructure deal tonight," he said, his voice carrying. "A deal that requires discretion, precision, the right people in the room." He gestured broadly. "This room." A murmur of agreement followed. "We've been negotiating for months," he continued, waiting on final confirmation from the primary investor. At that, several heads nodded. Names were exchanged in hushed tones. Speculation. Anticipation. No one knew exactly who that investor was, only that their decision would determine everything. Ethan smirked. "And I can promise you," he added, glancing back at Marcus, "it's not him." The room chuckled again, but this time the sound felt uncertain. Because something else was happening now. Something subtle. People were starting to look at Marcus differently. Not with respect. Not yet. But with curiosity. With hesitation. Because the confidence he carried didn't match the role they had assigned him. And that mismatch, it lingered. Like a note out of place in an otherwise perfect melody. Marcus shifted slightly, his gaze moving across the room once more. Taking it all in. The projections, the whispered conversations, the quiet calculations happening behind polished smiles. He had seen rooms like this before, not often. But enough to understand that the real decisions were never made in the open. They were made in moments like this, in tension, in doubt, in the space between what people thought they knew and what was actually true. A phone buzzed somewhere in the crowd, then another. Jennifer glanced down at her screen, her brow furrowing slightly. "Ethan," she said quietly, stepping closer. "The video's already getting traction." He waved her off. "Good," he said. "Let it. People need to see we enforce standards." Jennifer hesitated. "It's not exactly going that way." Ethan frowned, but didn't respond. Not yet. Because he still believed he was in control. Across the room, Rebecca took a step forward, then another. her tablet clutched tightly in her hands. Her eyes locked on Marcus, on the man she had almost dismissed as a mistake, on the name now burning in her mind. Marcus Reed, lead contributor, primary investor. Her pulse quickened, because if she was right, then everything that had just happened, everything Ethan had said, everything this room had accepted without question, was about to collapse. And the only thing more dangerous than being wrong in a room like this was being wrong in front of someone who held all the power. Rebecca stopped a few feet short of the group, her voice caught in her throat. For a moment, she couldn't speak, because saying it out loud would change everything. And once it was said, there would be no taking it back. Across from her, Marcus's eyes met hers, just for a second. And in that brief exchange, something passed between them. Not recognition, not exactly, but understanding. As if he already knew what she had discovered, as if he had been waiting for this exact moment. The room held its breath again, not because of what had happened, but because of what was about to. And for the first time since the wine had been thrown, the balance of power in the room began to tilt. Not visibly, not dramatically, but enough that the next word spoken would decide everything. And Rebecca Walsh was the one holding it. Her lips parted. Nothing came out. The weight of the moment pressed against her chest, tightening her breath. She could feel every eye in the room shifting, some toward Ethan, some toward Marcus, but more and more toward her. Because she had stepped forward. Because she had interrupted the script. "Ethan," she finally said, her voice softer than she intended. He turned, irritation flashing immediately across his face. "What?" he snapped. Rebecca swallowed. Her fingers tightened around the tablet, knuckles paling as she forced herself to keep her voice steady. "There might be a mistake." A ripple moved through the crowd, not loud, but enough. Ethan's expression hardened. "There is no mistake," he said. "We've already established that." Rebecca shook her head slightly. "I mean, on the list." That got his attention, not because he believed her, but because it challenged him. "Show me," he said. She hesitated. Just for a second. Because once she turned that screen around, once she exposed what she had seen, there would be no controlling what came next. Behind Ethan, Jennifer lifted her phone again, zooming in. "This just keeps getting better," she murmured under her breath. Rebecca exhaled slowly. Then she turned the tablet. Ethan glanced at it, impatient at first. Then again, slower. His eyes scanned the gold-highlighted names. His jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "What is this?" he asked. "Primary investor list," Rebecca said quietly. "That's not—" He stopped himself. His finger hovered over the screen, then tapped. Marcus Reed. The name sat there, unassuming, but everything about it now felt heavier. "That's not him," Ethan said quickly, too quickly. "That has to be someone else." Rebecca didn't respond, because she had already checked. Twice, 3 times. The details matched. The internal code, the confidential tag, everything. "Same name," Ethan muttered, shaking his head as if that alone dismissed it. "Happens all the time." He looked up, forcing a smile that didn't quite land. Coincidence. But the room didn't accept it as easily this time, because doubt had already taken root. And doubt, once planted, didn't disappear. It spread. Marcus watched the exchange without interruption, without urgency. His posture hadn't changed. His expression hadn't shifted. But something in his stillness now felt different, not passive, not waiting, observing, like someone watching a chain of events unfold exactly as expected. Ethan turned back toward him, his voice rising again, trying to reclaim control. "Let's not get distracted by clerical errors," he said. "You still don't belong here." Marcus tilted his head slightly. "Based on what?" he asked. The same question. But this time it didn't sound like a challenge. It sounded like a test. Ethan stepped closer, lowering his voice again, though it carried just enough for those nearby to hear. "Based on everything," he said. "The way you walked in, the way you carry yourself, the fact that no one here knows you." A pause. Then sharper. "And the fact that you didn't correct me." Marcus held his gaze. "I didn't need to," he said. That answer landed harder than anything before, because it wasn't defensive. It wasn't pleading. It was final. Jennifer let out a quiet laugh, though her eyes flicked back to the tablet in Rebecca's hands. "This is ridiculous," she said. "We're entertaining this because of a name on a screen?" "No," Rebecca said, surprising even herself. Her voice was stronger now. "We're entertaining it because we might be wrong." Silence. Ethan's eyes snapped back to her. "Careful," he said. Not loud, but cold. "You're suggesting I just humiliated the wrong person?" Rebecca didn't answer, because she didn't have to. The possibility was already there, hanging in the air, growing heavier by the second. Across the room, one of the guests, a gray-haired man in an expensive navy suit, cleared his throat. "I've been wondering," he said slowly, "if the primary investor hasn't been introduced yet." His gaze drifted toward Marcus. "Then where are they?" The question echoed, soft but devastating, because no one had an answer. Except, maybe, they already did. Ethan's smile faltered, just for a second. Then he forced it back. "You're all overthinking this," he said quickly. "There's no chance." "Then verify it," Rebecca said. The interruption stunned him. "Excuse me?" "Verify it," she repeated, holding the tablet closer. "Cross-check the ID, the internal code, the sponsorship records." Her heart pounded in her ears, but she didn't look away, because she knew now this wasn't just about a mistake. This was about a line that had already been crossed, and whether anyone in that room had the courage to admit it. Ethan's jaw tightened. He glanced at the guards. "Fine," he said sharply. "Check him." The lead guard nodded, stepping forward again. "Sir," he said to Marcus, more carefully this time, "we'll need identification." Marcus reached into his jacket once more. This time he didn't pause. He pulled out a simple leather wallet. Worn, clean, unremarkable. He opened it slowly, revealing a single card. Not flashy, not gold, just official. He handed it over. The guard took it, glancing down. His eyes moved once across the name, then again. Slower. A subtle shift passed through his expression. Not shock, not yet, but recognition of something that didn't align with what he had expected. He turned slightly, angling the card toward the light, toward Rebecca, toward the tablet. And in that moment, the room leaned forward. Not physically, but emotionally. Every person present drawn into the same silent question. What does it say? The guard looked up. His gaze flicked from Marcus to Ethan, then back again, and for the first time since this began, there was no certainty left in his eyes. Only hesitation. Only the awareness that whatever went to next was going to change everything. Because some lines, once crossed, didn't just fade away. They rewrote the entire story, and everyone in that room was about to find out exactly where they stood. The guard didn't speak right away. He kept his eyes on the card in his hand, reading it once more as if the letters might rearrange themselves into something easier to understand. His thumb hovered at the edge of it, uncertain whether to return it or hold on tighter. Marcus stood still, hands relaxed at his sides, as though the outcome of that silent inspection didn't concern him at all. Across from him, Ethan Caldwell shifted his weight. Impatience crept into his posture. "Well?" he demanded. The guard looked up. There was something different in his expression now. Not fear, not even respect, just awareness. "Name matches," he said carefully. A pause. "Identification appears valid." The words landed softly, but the impact rippled outward. Ethan's smile faltered again. "Appears," he echoed. "What does that mean?" "It means," the guard said, choosing each word with caution, "there's nothing here that indicates he's unauthorized." That wasn't the answer Ethan wanted. It wasn't even close. "That's not good enough," Ethan snapped. "Cross-check it. Call it in. Do whatever you have to do." Behind him, Jennifer lowered her phone slightly, her eyes flicking between the guard and Rebecca. The energy in the room had shifted again, less certain, less comfortable. The laughter had disappeared completely now. Only quiet remained, and watching, always watching. Marcus extended his hand slightly, not to take the card back, but simply to remind the guard it was his. The guard hesitated, then returned it. "Thank you," Marcus said. No edge, no satisfaction, just acknowledgement. Ethan exhaled sharply, running a hand over his jaw. "This is ridiculous," he muttered. "We're wasting time on a technicality." He turned to the room, raising his voice again. "Ladies and gentlemen, let's be clear. This man, whatever his name is, does not belong in this space. And I'm not going to let a paperwork glitch turn this into something it's not." No one responded. Not out loud. But something in the silence had changed. Because now it wasn't just Marcus being judged. It was Ethan. And for the first time, some of the eyes on him weren't admiring. They were questioning. Near the edge of the crowd, the older woman who had hesitated earlier shifted her stance again. Her lips parted as if she might speak this time. Then she closed them, looked away. A younger man beside her, one of the junior analysts from a firm out of Boston, leaned forward slightly, his voice barely above a whisper. "Maybe we should just check," he said. His colleague nudged him sharply. "Don't," she muttered. "This isn't your place." He straightened immediately, eyes dropping. Silence reinforced. Across the room, Lena adjusted the tray in her hands again. But she wasn't looking at the guests anymore. She was looking at Marcus. At the way he stood. At the way he hadn't raised his voice once. At the way the room seemed to move around him instead of the other way around. The cufflink caught the light again as he shifted slightly. R.E. Her breath caught. A memory clicked into place. A private event. 6 months ago. Small. Exclusive. No more than 20 people. She had been assigned to serve drinks that night, moving quietly between conversations she wasn't meant to hear. But she had listened anyway. Not to gossip. To the tone. The way people spoke when they believed they were among equals, or when they believed they were not. She remembered one man in particular, older, sharply dressed, speaking with careful respect. "He doesn't attend these things often," the man had said. "Prefers to stay out of the spotlight." "Who?" someone else had asked. The man had smiled faintly. "You'll know when you see him." Lena hadn't understood at the time, but she remembered the detail that came next. The cufflinks, the man had added. Custom, engraved. You won't miss them. Her eyes flicked back to Marcus, to the silver glint at his wrist. Her heart began to pound. Not from fear, from realization. Back near the center, Ethan had turned his attention to Rebecca again. You, he said sharply. Where exactly did you find that list? Rebecca held her ground, though her grip on the tablet tightened. It's part of the internal registry, she said. It's not visible on the public check-in system. Ethan stepped closer. Then it's restricted for a reason. Yes, Rebecca said quietly. And you're misreading it. No, she said, louder now. I'm not. The words surprised even her, but once spoken, they didn't waver. I double-checked the identifiers, she continued. The investment category, the access clearance, it all aligns. With what? Ethan challenged. Rebecca didn't answer immediately, because saying it plainly, saying it out loud in front of everyone, would mean crossing a line she couldn't uncross. Behind her, Alex shifted nervously. Rebecca, he whispered. She ignored him. Her eyes moved past Ethan, to Marcus. He met her gaze again. Calm, steady, not asking, not pushing, just waiting. And in that waiting, she found something she hadn't expected. Courage. Not loud, not dramatic, but enough. She turned back to Ethan. With him, she said. The room went still again. Not with shock, with recognition. Because even those who didn't fully understand what she meant felt the weight of it. Ethan stared at her, then laughed. A sharp, humorless sound. You're telling me, he said slowly, that this man is connected to a $300 million deal? Rebecca didn't respond, because she didn't need to. The implication hung there, heavy, unavoidable. Ethan shook his head, stepping back. No, he said. No, that's not happening. He turned to the guards again, his voice rising. Remove him. Now. But this time, they didn't move. Not immediately. Because something in the room had shifted beyond command, beyond assumption, beyond control. And for the first time since the wine had been thrown, the silence wasn't protecting Ethan. It was isolating him. Marcus adjusted his jacket slightly, the fabric still damp but settling. He glanced once more around the ballroom, at the people who had watched, at the ones who had stayed silent, at the ones who were still deciding. Then he spoke, not loudly, but clearly enough that everyone heard. You had every chance, he said. The words weren't directed at one person. They were directed at all of them. And in that moment, the silence changed again, from passive to accountable. And somewhere deep in the room, the first crack of something much larger began to spread. It didn't shatter the room all at once. It moved slowly, quietly, from one person to the next, like a thought no one wanted to own but couldn't ignore. The laughter had died completely now. Even the low murmur of polite conversation had disappeared, replaced by a silence that felt heavier than before. Not empty, loaded. Because now people weren't just watching Marcus, they were watching each other, waiting to see who would move first, waiting to see who would admit something had gone wrong. Ethan Caldwell felt it, that shift, that loss of control, and he hated it. This is over, he said sharply, his voice cutting through the tension again, louder than necessary. We're not turning this into a spectacle. But it already was one. Phones were still raised, not as casually now, more deliberately. People weren't just recording Marcus anymore. They were recording Ethan, recording the guards, recording the moment where certainty had begun to crack. Jennifer stepped closer to Ethan, lowering her phone just enough to whisper. "The comments are picking up fast," she said. "People are asking questions." "Good," Ethan snapped. "Let them. It'll blow over." Jennifer hesitated. "It's not blowing over," she said quietly. "Not like this." Ethan ignored her, because acknowledging that meant acknowledging something else, that he might not be in control anymore. Across the room, Lena stood frozen near the edge of the service station, her tray forgotten in her hands. Her mind replayed the memory again, the private dinner, the hushed voices, the respect in the way people spoke about someone who wasn't even there. He doesn't show up unless it matters. You won't recognize him at first. But when you do, you'll understand why the room changes. Lena's eyes moved slowly back to Marcus, to the quiet way he held himself, to the absence of panic, to the fact that even now, after everything that had just happened, he wasn't trying to explain himself. He wasn't trying to fix anything. He wasn't trying to prove anything. Because people who needed to prove something did. Her grip tightened on the tray. The cufflink caught the light again. R.E. Her breath hitched. It wasn't just familiar anymore. It was certain. And certainty, once it arrived, didn't leave room for doubt. She took a step forward, then stopped. Her eyes flicked toward the manager standing near the bar, arms crossed, watching the scene unfold with tight, controlled discomfort. If she spoke up, if she said what she was thinking, she wouldn't just be interrupting a moment. She'd be challenging the entire hierarchy of the room. And people like her, people in uniforms carrying trays, moving quietly through spaces they didn't own, didn't challenge people like Ethan Caldwell. They observed. They stayed invisible. They kept their jobs. Lena swallowed. Her heart pounded in her ears. "Stay quiet," she told herself. "It's not your place." But her eyes returned to Marcus, to the wine stain on his shirt, to the way no one had stepped forward when it happened, to the way the room had accepted it. And something in her chest tightened, because she had seen that before. Not here, not in a ballroom like this, but in smaller ways. Everywhere. A man ignored at a counter, a voice dismissed in a meeting, a look that said everything without saying anything at all. And every time, silence made it worse. Back near the center, Rebecca still stood with the tablet, her breathing shallow but steady. She hadn't moved since she spoke, because now it wasn't just her decision, it was the room's. Ethan turned to her again, his patience gone. "Step back," he said. "You've done enough." Rebecca didn't move. "I'm just trying to prevent a mistake," she replied. "You already made one," Ethan shot back. "Now fix it." The words landed hard. A few people shifted again, uncomfortable, not with Marcus this time, with him. The guard nearest Marcus cleared his throat again. "Sir," he said, addressing Ethan carefully, "we should probably—" "You should do your job," Ethan interrupted. "I am," the guard said. A pause, then more firmly, "which is why I'm asking for clarity." That was new. That wasn't obedience. That was resistance. Small, measured, but real. Ethan stared at him, then let out a sharp breath. "Fine," he said. "You want clarity?" He turned, gesturing toward Marcus again. "Ask him. Ask him who he thinks he is." The challenge hung in the air. All eyes shifted back to Marcus, waiting, expecting, demanding. Marcus didn't rush, didn't step forward, didn't raise his voice. He simply looked at Ethan, then at the room, then back again. "I already told you," he said quietly. Ethan's jaw tightened. "No," he said. "You didn't." Marcus held his gaze. "I'm exactly where I need to be." The same words. But now, they carried something different. Not defiance, not even confidence. Truth, unshaken, unmovable. Ethan shook his head, almost laughing, but there was no humor left in it. "This is unbelievable," he muttered. Behind him, Jennifer's phone buzzed again, and again, and again. She glanced down, her eyes widening slightly. "Ethan," she said, her voice no longer steady. He ignored her. "Ethan," she repeated, louder now. "What?" he snapped. She turned the screen toward him. The video, his face, Marcus, the wine, the silence, and below it, comments. Thousands. Climbing. Questions. Accusations. People asking who the man was. People asking why no one stepped in. People asking what kind of room allowed something like that to happen. Ethan's expression flickered, just for a second. But it was enough, because the room saw it, saw the crack, saw the moment where certainty gave way to something else, something fragile, something uncertain. Across the floor, Lena took another step forward. This time she didn't stop. Her voice came out before she could second-guess it. Soft, but clear. "I've seen him before." The words cut through the room like a quiet blade. Heads turned. Not all at once, but enough. Ethan looked over sharply. "What?" he demanded. Lena hesitated only for a moment, then steadied herself. "At a private event," she said, "months ago." Her voice grew stronger with each word, the way they talked about him, the way they waited for him. She looked directly at Marcus now, then back at Ethan. They didn't treat him like he didn't belong. Silence followed. Not passive this time. Active. Listening. Weighing. Ethan's face hardened. "You're a server," he said coldly. "You don't get to decide who belongs here." Lena's hands tightened around the tray. "I'm not deciding," she said. "I'm remembering." The distinction landed, harder than anyone expected, because memory, real memory, didn't bend easily. And suddenly, the room wasn't just questioning Marcus, it was questioning everything it thought it knew. And somewhere, deep beneath the surface, the truth was no longer hidden. It was rising, slowly, inevitable, and no one in that ballroom was ready for what it was about to become. The silence didn't break. It deepened, like the room itself was holding its breath, waiting for something, anything, to restore the order that had been quietly slipping away. Ethan Caldwell stood at the center of it, jaw tight, eyes moving faster now as he tried to reassert control over something that no longer felt fully his. "This is getting out of hand," he said, his voice louder again, sharper, forcing authority back into the room. "We're not turning a misunderstanding into a full-blown investigation." But no one responded, because it no longer felt like a misunderstanding. It felt like something else entirely, something bigger. The lead security guard shifted his stance, glancing briefly toward Rebecca. "Let's run a full verification," he said. Ethan turned sharply. "I already told you, and we heard you," the guard replied, calm but firm. "Now we're going to verify." That was the second time he had pushed back, not aggressively, but clearly, and everyone heard it. Ethan's control slipped another inch. Across the room, Rebecca stepped closer, holding the tablet between them like it was something fragile and dangerous. "There's a secondary classification tied to his name," she said. It doesn't show up in the standard guest list. Ethan let out a short laugh. Because it's not real, he said. It's a system error. Rebecca shook her head. No, she said. It's not. She tapped the screen again, pulling up a deeper layer of information, one that required internal clearance, one that most of the guests in this room would never see. Columns of data appeared. Investment codes, authorization levels, encrypted tags. The kind of information that wasn't meant for public viewing. The guard leaned in. So what does it say? He asked. Rebecca hesitated. Because reading it out loud meant giving it weight, making it real. It lists him, she said slowly, under restricted investor access. Ethan scoffed immediately. Restricted? He repeated. You're telling me we're hiding investors now? Rebecca didn't rise to it. She kept her focus on the screen. It also flags his profile as confidential, she added. That's standard for high-level contributors. The word contributor landed, and the room reacted. Not outwardly, but internally. Because suddenly, the narrative didn't fit as cleanly as it had before. Ethan crossed his arms. You're stretching, he said. You're trying to make this into something it's not. Then let's confirm it, Rebecca replied. Her voice was steady now, more certain than before, because the deeper she went into the system, the clearer it became. This wasn't a mistake. But Ethan wasn't listening anymore. He stepped forward again, closing the distance between himself and Marcus. Enough, he said. I'm done entertaining this. His voice dropped, lower now, more controlled, but carrying more threat. You've made your point, he said. Now you can leave before this gets worse for you. Marcus didn't move, didn't respond, didn't even shift his posture, and that, more than anything, made Ethan's composure crack. You think this is a game? Ethan pressed. You think standing there in silence makes you look important? Marcus met his gaze. No, he said quietly. It just makes you louder. The words hit clean. No anger, no accusation, just truth. A few people in the crowd shifted again. One man near the bar lowered his glass slowly, eyes narrowing as he studied Marcus more closely now. Jennifer's phone buzzed again. She checked it, her expression tightening. Ethan, she started. Not now, he snapped. It is now, she said. That got his attention. He turned, irritation flashing again. What? She stepped closer, turning the screen toward him. This is trending, she said. The video, it's already being shared outside the event. Ethan stared at the screen, at his own image, at the moment the wine left the glass, at Marcus standing still, absorbing it, at the silence that followed, and beneath it, comments. Thousands of them, more than before, faster than before, asking questions. Not about Marcus, about him. What is this event? Why did no one stop him? Who is that man? Ethan's grip tightened around his own glass. This doesn't change anything, he said. But his voice didn't carry the same certainty, because now the room wasn't just watching. The world was. And that changed everything. The guard turned slightly, speaking into his earpiece. Control, this is floor security, he said quietly. We need confirmation on a restricted investor profile. Name, Marcus Reed. A pause. Static. Then a voice came back through the earpiece, faint but audible enough for those closest to hear. Repeat name. The guard did. Another pause. Longer this time. The kind that stretched just enough to matter. Ethan shifted. See? He said quickly. Nothing's coming back. But the guard didn't respond. because something was coming back. He could hear it. Even if the rest of the room couldn't. "Stand by," the voice said, verifying clearance level. The guard's posture changed slightly, more attentive, more focused. Rebecca's heart began to race again, because now the system wasn't just being questioned, it was answering. Marcus stood quietly, hands at his sides, his gaze steady, not on Ethan, not on the guards, but somewhere beyond them. As if he had already heard the answer, as if he had already moved past this moment. Lena took another small step forward, barely noticeable, her eyes locked on him. Everything she remembered was aligning now. The cufflinks, the presence, the way people had spoken about him, and the way he stood now, like none of this surprised him, like he had seen rooms like this before, rooms that got it wrong. The voice in the guard's earpiece returned, clearer this time, more urgent. Confirmed. The guard's eyes lifted, slowly. He looked at Marcus, then at Rebecca, then at Ethan, and for the first time, there was no hesitation left in his expression, only certainty, the kind that changes everything. "Sir," he said, his voice no longer uncertain, "this is not an error." The words fell into the room like a weight, heavy, unavoidable. Ethan froze. "What?" he demanded. The guard didn't look away. "His clearance level is valid," he said, "and his profile is flagged at the highest tier available for this event." Silence. Total. Complete. The kind that didn't just fill the room, it consumed it. Because now there was no system error to hide behind, no coincidence to explain it away, no easy answer. Only one question left. And it hung in the air, louder than anything Ethan had said all night. If he belongs here, then who have we been talking to, and what have we just done? No one answered. No one could. The question didn't belong to a single voice anymore. It belonged to the room. It hung above them like something fragile, something dangerous, something that couldn't be undone once acknowledged. Ethan Caldwell stood frozen, his hand still wrapped around the stem of his glass, though he no longer seemed aware of it. "That's not possible," he said finally. The words came out flat, not forceful, not convincing, just automatic. The guard didn't respond, because there was nothing left to argue. Rebecca still held the tablet in front of her, the gold-highlighted list glowing faintly in the dim light. Marcus Reed's name remained at the top, unchanged, undeniable. Primary investor, lead contributor, confidential. Each word now carried weight. Each word rewrote everything that had happened in the last 10 minutes. Ethan shook his head slowly, stepping back as if distance alone could separate him from what he was hearing. "There has to be another explanation," he muttered. "A duplicate profile, a system override. Something." "There isn't," Rebecca said quietly. Her voice didn't rise. It didn't need to, because the truth had already settled into the room. Across the ballroom, people began to shift, not dramatically, not all at once, but enough. A man who had been standing beside Ethan took a step back, then another. A woman lowered her phone completely, her expression tightening with something that looked a lot like regret. The subtle rearranging of space began. The invisible lines that had once drawn people toward power now pulled them away from it. Jennifer stared at her phone again, her face paling. "It's over 100,000 views," she whispered. No one responded, because the number didn't matter anymore. What mattered was what it meant. This wasn't contained. It wasn't private. It wasn't going away. Marcus Reed stood in the center of it all, as he had from the beginning. Still, unshaken. The wine had dried along the collar of his shirt now, leaving faint streaks that caught the light in uneven patterns. His jacket hung slightly heavier on one side, the fabric still damp. But none of it seemed to touch him. None of it seemed to define him. Ethan turned back toward him slowly. Really looked at him this time. Not as a problem. Not as an intruder. But as a possibility. And that possibility unsettled him more than anything else. You... Ethan started, then stopped. His voice failed him. He cleared his throat. You're telling me... He tried again, forcing the words out. That... You're the investor? Marcus didn't answer right away. He let the silence stretch, let the weight of the question settle. Then he spoke. I didn't say that, he replied. The answer landed in a way no one expected. Not denial, not confirmation. Something else. Something that made Ethan's grip tighten again. Then say it, Ethan demanded, his voice rising slightly. If this is some kind of misunderstanding, clear it up. Marcus held his gaze. I don't need to. That was the moment. The exact moment the room shifted. Not when the system confirmed his identity. Not when Rebecca found his name. Not even when the guards stepped back. It was this. This refusal. This quiet, unshakable certainty. Because people who needed validation asked for it. People who needed recognition claimed it. Marcus did neither. And in doing so, he forced the room to confront something far more unsettling. That he didn't need their belief. That their approval didn't define him. That whatever he was, he had been it long before they noticed. The doors at the far end of the ballroom opened. No one had been watching them. Until now. A man stepped in, his presence immediately noticeable. Not because he demanded attention, but because the room responded to him. Charles Whitaker, chairman of Whitaker Capital. 70 years old, silver-haired, his posture still straight despite the weight of decades behind him. He didn't rush, didn't announce himself. But the space around him shifted as he walked. Conversations that had been frozen now fell completely silent. People moved aside instinctively, because they knew him, because he mattered, because in a room full of influence, he was one of the few who truly held it. Whitaker's eyes scanned the room once, quick, measured, then stopped, on Marcus. Everything else disappeared in that moment. The crowd, the tension, the lingering whispers, it all faded into the background. Whitaker took a step forward, then another. His expression didn't change, but something in his pace did, more direct, more certain. Ethan noticed, and for the first time that night, fear touched his face. Not panic, not yet, but recognition, the kind that comes too late. Whitaker stopped a few feet from Marcus, close enough that there was no confusion, no misunderstanding, no room for interpretation. The silence in the room became absolute. Even the faint hum of the city beyond the glass walls seemed to disappear. Whitaker looked at Marcus, not down, not past, at him. And then, he smiled, not broadly, not theatrically, but with quiet respect. Mr. Reed, he said, his voice carried without effort. Clear, unmistakable. We've been waiting for you. The words landed like a shockwave, not loud, but powerful enough to ripple through every person in the room. Ethan's face drained of color. Jennifer's phone slipped slightly in her grip. Rebecca exhaled sharply, her breath catching in her chest. Lena closed her eyes for just a second, as if confirming something she had already known. Because now there was no doubt, no uncertainty, no room left for interpretation. Marcus Reed wasn't just someone who belonged in that room. He was someone the room had been waiting for. And every word that had been spoken, every assumption that had been made, every moment of silence that had allowed it to happen, came crashing back all at once. Ethan took a step backward, then another. His voice came out thin. "Wait," he said. There's been some kind of misunderstanding." Whitaker didn't look at him, didn't acknowledge him at all, because he didn't need to. His focus remained on Marcus, on the man who had stood quietly while the room got it wrong, on the man who had never once tried to correct them, on the man who had allowed them to reveal exactly who they were. Marcus met his gaze, and for the first time since the night began, something shifted in his expression. Not anger, not satisfaction, just acknowledgement of the moment, of the truth finally catching up. And as the weight of it settled into the room, there was no longer any question left, only consequences, and they were just beginning. No one moved, not immediately, because when the truth lands like that, clean, undeniable, irreversible, it doesn't create chaos first. It creates stillness, the kind that forces every person in the room to look inward before they look anywhere else. Charles Whitaker stood beside Marcus Reed, his presence steady, his expression composed, as though nothing about this moment surprised him. Because it didn't. He had seen rooms like this before, rooms that believed they understood power, until they didn't. Ethan Caldwell's lips parted, but no sound came out at first. His mind was moving too fast, trying to catch up, trying to find a version of events that didn't end like this. "Mr. Whitaker," he finally managed, stepping forward, forcing his voice into something resembling control. "There's been a misunderstanding." Whitaker didn't look at him. Not yet. Because Ethan wasn't the one who mattered anymore. Marcus was. "You've had quite an evening," Whitaker said quietly to Marcus, his tone carrying just enough for the room to hear. Marcus gave a small nod. "Nothing I haven't seen before," he replied. The words were simple, but they carried history, weight, a life behind them. Ethan flinched slightly. Because those words weren't just about tonight. They were about every moment like this. Every assumption, every dismissal, every quiet judgment made without consequence. Until now. "This isn't what it looks like," Ethan pressed quickly, his voice tightening. "We didn't know." Marcus turned to him. Not sharply, not aggressively. Just enough. "You didn't ask," he said. The sentence cut deeper than anything else had, because it was true. Painfully, undeniably true. Ethan swallowed. "I was trying to protect the integrity of the event," he said. "We've had issues before." "With what?" Marcus asked. The question hung there. Ethan hesitated, because there was no answer he could give that didn't reveal exactly what had been driving his decisions. Marcus didn't wait for one. "You made a decision," he said, "based on what you thought you saw." A pause, and everyone else followed. The room felt smaller now, tighter, like the walls themselves had moved in. Jennifer lowered her phone completely this time. Her hands trembled slightly as she stared at the screen. The video had passed 500,000 views. Comments flooded faster than she could read. Not cheering, not laughing, judging, questioning, condemning. She looked up at Ethan. For the first time that night, she wasn't standing beside him. She was standing near him. There was a difference. Rebecca stepped back slowly, lowering the tablet. Her part in this moment was done. The truth had been revealed. Now it was something else entirely. The aftermath. Whitaker finally turned his attention to Ethan. The shift was subtle, but it carried weight. "You're Mr. Caldwell, correct?" he asked. Ethan nodded quickly. "Yes, sir. And I assure you, this situation..." Whitaker raised a hand, not sharply, but enough to stop him. "I've seen the video," he said. The words were calm, measured, but final. Ethan's face drained further. "That doesn't show the full context," he said quickly. "It doesn't show, it shows enough." Silence. Whitaker let that settle before continuing. "This event," he said, glancing briefly around the room, "exists because of people who believe in something larger than themselves." His gaze returned to Ethan, not smaller. The distinction landed, hard, because everyone understood it. Ethan opened his mouth again, but nothing came out. There was nothing left to say. Not that would fix this. Not that would undo what had already been done. Marcus reached up, adjusting his jacket slightly, the fabric still stiff where the wine had dried. A small gesture, but deliberate. He looked at Whitaker. "I think I've seen enough for one night," he said. Whitaker nodded. "Of course." The simplicity of the exchange struck the room in a way no argument could, because it confirmed something without needing to explain it. Marcus wasn't asking permission. He was deciding, and the room was adjusting to that reality in real time. Ethan took a step forward. "Wait," he said. Marcus paused, slowly turned. Ethan's voice cracked slightly now, not with anger, with something else, something closer to fear. "We can fix this," he said. "Whatever damage, whatever impression this created, we can address it." Marcus studied him for a moment, not with hostility, not with satisfaction, just clarity. "You already did address it," he said. Ethan shook his head. "No, I mean the deal, the partnership, the investment." Marcus's expression didn't change. "There is no deal," he said. The words landed like a final verdict, not loud, not dramatic, but absolute. Ethan froze. "What?" he whispered. "The decision was already made," Marcus continued. "Tonight just confirmed it." A ripple moved through the room again, this time heavier, because now the consequences weren't abstract. They were real, immediate, financial, corporate, personal. Whitaker stepped forward slightly. "The board will be informed," he said calmly. "Effective immediately." Ethan's breathing became uneven. "You're pulling out?" he asked. Marcus didn't answer directly. He didn't need to. The answer was already there, in his posture, in his tone, in the way the room had shifted around him. Jennifer stepped back another step, then another. Her phone still buzzed in her hand, but she wasn't filming anymore. No one was, because this wasn't a moment to capture. It was a moment to face. Across the room, people began to move, not toward Marcus, not toward Ethan. Away. Quietly. Subtly. The same way they had once moved toward power, they now moved away from its collapse. Rebecca watched it happen, her chest tight, because she understood now. This wasn't just about one moment. It was about everything that moment revealed. Marcus glanced once more around the ballroom, at the people, at the silence, at the space that had allowed everything to unfold exactly as it had. Then he turned and walked, not quickly, not dramatically, just forward, toward the exit. Whitaker followed a step behind, not leading, not directing, accompanying. The doors opened. The cool Chicago air drifted in faintly, brushing against the edges of the room. And just like that, the man they had judged, dismissed, and humiliated walked out with the only thing that had ever mattered, his dignity intact. Behind him, the room remained. But it wasn't the same room anymore. Because now, every person inside it knew exactly what their silence had cost, and there was no way to unlearn it. The ballroom didn't empty all at once. It unraveled, quietly. People didn't rush for the doors. They didn't speak loudly or make scenes. Instead, they drifted, like guests leaving a wake, not a celebration. Conversations resumed, but in hushed tones. Not about deals, not about investments, about what they had just witnessed and what it meant. Ethan Caldwell stood exactly where Marcus had left him, frozen in the center of a room that no longer revolved around him. For the first time that night, no one was standing close. No one was laughing at his side. No one was waiting for his approval. Jennifer had moved 10 feet away, her back half turned, her phone pressed to her ear. "Yes, I saw it," she whispered urgently. "No, it's worse than it looks. The investor. Yes, that one. I know. I know." Her voice faded into the background, because no one was listening to her anymore either. The guard stepped back, clearing space instinctively, as if whatever authority he thought he had moments ago had shifted beyond his reach. Rebecca lowered her tablet completely now. Her hands were steady again, but her expression had changed. She wasn't anxious anymore. She wasn't uncertain. She was resolved, because she had seen the truth before anyone else, and now everyone else was catching up. Ethan finally moved. One step, then another. He turned in a slow circle as if expecting someone, anyone, to meet his eyes, to reassure him, to confirm that this could still be fixed. No one did. Instead, people avoided his gaze. Or worse, they met it briefly, and then looked away. Not out of fear, out of distance. He exhaled sharply. "This isn't over," he said, though no one had asked. His voice sounded different now, not commanding, not confident, defensive. A man near the bar, one of the senior partners from a firm Ethan had been trying to impress all night, adjusted his cufflinks slowly, then spoke. "Actually," he said, his tone measured, "it might be." Ethan turned toward him. "What's that supposed to mean?" The man didn't raise his voice, didn't step forward. He simply held Ethan's gaze. "It means," he said, "you just turned a room full of opportunity into a liability." The words landed harder than anything else that night, because they weren't emotional. They were practical, cold, accurate. Another voice joined in. From the back. "We were counting on that deal," someone said quietly. "And now?" another replied. Silence answered that question, because everyone knew. Across the room, phones buzzed again. More alerts, more headlines, more attention. Not just on Marcus, on the event, on the company, on Ethan. Jennifer ended her call abruptly, turning back toward him. "They're pulling statements," she said. "Media, partners, even internal teams. Everyone's reacting." Ethan shook his head. "PR can handle this," he said. "We've managed worse." Jennifer didn't respond. Because this wasn't worse. This was different. This wasn't a rumor. This wasn't a leak. This was visible, clear, documented, and tied directly to him. Rebecca stepped forward again, not toward Marcus this time, but toward Ethan. Her voice was calm, professional, but there was something underneath it now, something firm. "We'll need to file an incident report," she said. Ethan stared at her. "An incident report?" "Yes. For what?" Rebecca didn't hesitate. "For what happened?" Ethan let out a short, disbelieving laugh. "You're serious?" "Yes." The simplicity of her answer hit him harder than if she had argued. Because she wasn't asking. She wasn't negotiating. She was documenting. And documentation meant accountability. Ethan ran a hand through his hair, pacing now. "This is being blown out of proportion," he muttered. "No one even knows the full story." A voice from nearby answered him. "We saw enough." It was Lena. She stood there now without the tray, hands at her sides, her posture straighter than before. Not defiant, not aggressive, just present. Ethan looked at her, something like disbelief crossing his face. "You?" he said. "You're going to weigh in on this?" Lena didn't flinch. "I already did," she replied. A few people nodded slightly. Not openly, but enough. Ethan turned away, shaking his head. "This is unbelievable," he said. "Everyone suddenly has an opinion." "No," Rebecca said quietly. "Everyone always did." A pause. They just didn't say it. The truth of that settled into the room like a final piece clicking into place, because that was the real shift. Not Marcus's identity, not the deal, not the consequences. The silence, and what it had allowed. Ethan stopped pacing. His shoulders dropped slightly, not in surrender, but in realization. He looked toward the doors Marcus had walked through. They were closed now. Still, unremarkable, as if nothing had happened. But everything had. Behind those doors, Marcus Reed had left with his dignity intact. Inside, Ethan remained. With everything else, a phone buzzed in his pocket. He didn't check it. He didn't need to. He already knew what it would say. Calls, messages, questions, consequences. The room continued to thin, guests leaving in quiet clusters, their conversations low and urgent. Some avoided Ethan entirely. Others gave him a final look. Not angry, not sympathetic, just final. Like they had already decided something. Rebecca watched them go, then looked back at Ethan. "We'll be in touch," she said. Not unkindly, but not gently either. Just professionally. She turned and walked away. Lena followed shortly after, disappearing back into the service corridor. Jennifer lingered a moment longer, then stepped past Ethan without speaking, her phone already pressed to her ear again. And just like that, he was alone. In a room that had once amplified his voice, now it swallowed it. The chandeliers still glowed. The music had not resumed. The air felt heavier, colder. Ethan stood there, surrounded by everything he had built, and realized, in a single, quiet moment, how quickly it could disappear. Because power, when built on assumption, doesn't collapse loudly. It fades. One decision at a time. And tonight, he had made the one that mattered most. Outside, beyond the glass walls, the city carried on, unchanged, unmoved. But inside that ballroom, everything had shifted, and there was no going back. Morning came quietly. No headlines yet in the streets, no noise in the air. Just the soft hum of a city waking up. Coffee shops opening, buses hissing to a stop, footsteps moving along sidewalks still damp from the night before. Southside Chicago. A different world from the ballroom. Here, the buildings didn't shine. Paint peeled, windows cracked, streetlights flickered even after sunrise. But life moved. Real life. Marcus Reed walked down the block like he always did. Same pace, same posture, same quiet presence. The suit from last night was gone. In its place, a simple jacket, clean, worn at the edges, comfortable. The kind of clothing that didn't demand attention. The kind that let a man move through the world without being watched. A small grocery bag hung from his hand. Inside, bread, milk, a few canned goods. Nothing expensive, nothing flashy. He stopped at the same corner house he had visited 100 times before. Mrs. Ellison's porch creaked as he stepped up. The door was already open. "You're late," she called from inside. Marcus smiled faintly. 5 minutes, he said. "That's late," she replied. He stepped inside. The house smelled like old wood and something cooking low on the stove. He set the bag down on the counter, pulling out the items one by one. "You didn't have to do this," she said, watching him. "I know," he answered. That was always the exchange. Same words, same rhythm. Because kindness for Marcus wasn't a performance. It was routine. He checked the hinge on her kitchen cabinet next, tightening it slightly with a small tool he pulled from his pocket. The wood held this time, stronger than before. "You still fixing things?" she said, shaking her head. "Thought you'd be too important for that by now." Marcus paused for a moment, then shrugged. "Some things don't need fixing," he said, "just taking care of." She watched him for a long second, then nodded, because she understood more than most. Across town, the headlines had started. Phones buzzed, notifications stacked. The video had crossed 1 million views overnight. Executive humiliates investor at charity gala. $300 million deal collapses after public incident. Corporate silence under fire. Ethan Caldwell's name was everywhere. Not praised, not respected. Exposed. The company's board had already issued a statement. Temporary suspension, internal investigation, partnerships under review, investors pulling back. The numbers were moving fast. Too fast. Because in rooms like that, reputation wasn't just currency. It was everything. And once it cracked, it didn't heal easily. Back on the south side, none of that noise reached Marcus. Not directly. He stepped back onto the street, the morning sun catching the edge of his sleeve. The cufflink was there again. R.E. clean now. Polished, but still understated. Still easy to miss. Lena stood at the end of the block. She hadn't meant to come. Not really. But something had pulled her there. Curiosity. Maybe. Or something deeper. She had asked around, followed a few directions, and now she stood there, unsure if she should approach. Marcus noticed her before she spoke. He always noticed. "Morning," he said. Lena hesitated, then stepped forward. "Hi," she replied. Her voice was quieter than it had been the night before. Not from fear, from respect. "I didn't expect to see you here," she said. Marcus nodded slightly. Most people don't. She glanced around. At the buildings, at the street, at the life that looked nothing like the ballroom. "I just wanted to say," she started, then stopped. Because words felt smaller now, after everything. Marcus waited, not pushing, not filling the silence, letting her find it. "I should have spoken sooner," she said finally. The honesty in her voice was raw, real. Marcus considered that, then shook his head slightly. "You spoke when it mattered," he said. She exhaled, a tension she hadn't realized she was holding, easing just a little. Her eyes dropped briefly to his wrist, to the cufflink, then back up. That night, she said, they talked about you like you changed things. Marcus smiled faintly. People say a lot of things. But it's true, isn't it? She asked. He didn't answer right away. Instead, he looked down the street, at a group of kids running past, laughing, at a man opening up a small shop across the road, at a woman helping someone carry groceries up a set of worn steps. This is what matters, he said finally. Lena followed his gaze. And the deal? She asked. Marcus turned back to her. That company needed more than money, he said. They needed to change. And they won't now? They might, he said. But not because of me. A pause. Because of what they lost. The words settled, heavy, but not bitter, just true. Lena nodded slowly. She understood. Maybe not everything, but enough. Thank you, she said. For what? Marcus asked. For not becoming what they expected, she said. He held her gaze for a moment, then gave a small nod. Take care of yourself, he said. She smiled. You too. He turned and walked down the street. No audience, no cameras, no applause. Just a man moving through his world the same way he always had. Quietly. With purpose. Later that day, in a small office just a few blocks away, Marcus sat across from a local business owner. Papers spread across the table. Plans, budgets, opportunities. Different from the ballroom, but no less important. This could work, the owner said, hopeful but uncertain. Marcus nodded. It will, he said. Not loud, not dramatic. Just certain. Because real power didn't need to announce itself. It built, quietly, steadily, where it mattered. Outside, the city continued. The story spread. The consequences unfolded. But here, something else was happening. Something quieter. Something lasting. A different kind of investment. A different kind of future. And as the sun dipped lower over Chicago, casting long shadows across the streets, one truth remained. Unshaken. Unchanged. Power doesn't come from being seen. Dignity doesn't come from being recognized. And the people who understand that never need to prove it. Because in the end,
it's not about who you are in the room. It's about who you are when you leave it. And whenever, you still stand the same. If you had been there that night, would you have spoken up or stayed silent like the rest? When Michael Brett walked out of that ballroom, with wine still staining his shirt, but his dignity untouched. That's where the moment everything truly became clear. Because in the end, this wasn't about power or money. It was about how quickly people decide someone's worth without ever asking who they really are. So today, think about this. Next time you see someone being judged, dismissed, or treated unfairly, don't wait for proof like Marcus. Just choose to stand on the right side of it, even if you stand alone. Now, tell me honestly, if you were in that room, would you have stepped in or would you have stayed quiet like everyone else? Write your answer below. And if this story makes you think a little deeper, stay with me, because the next one might hit even closer to our life.